Okay, so with this episode, I'll briefly discuss the most common health challenges in autism and basically give you an overview of what we'll be discussing in future episodes in much more depth. So probably one of the most common health challenges is that of gut dysfunction. So as you may be aware, many autistic kids have issues with constipation, diarrhea, um, gastrointestinal reflux, gaseousness, bloating, abdominal pain. So these are very common. Other also common gut problems that are more hidden include intestinal yeast overgrowth, bacterial infections or overgrowth. We'll talk a lot about that later on, how to test for it, what to do about it. And then beyond the gut, but related to it, because about 70% of the immune cells in the body are located in the gut. So as you can imagine, if that's where the a large part of the immune system resides, a dysfunctional gut will likely lead to a dysfunctional immune system. So with many autistic kids, the immune system is dysregulated in some way. So that may be an overactive immune system or other issues with certain immune cells being in too high a supply, causing inflammation, and certain anti-inflammatory immune cells not having enough of those, which causes imbalances, and they manifest outside of the gut as well, these immune imbalances. In future episodes, we'll talk about what factors can cause the immune system to get dysregulated. So there's many things. These include obviously gut infections and leaky gut. Heavy metals and toxic chemicals can cause immune system dysregulation, inflammation for various reasons. So, for example, from allergies, food sensitivities, things like that. There may also be an autoimmune aspect. So, we'll cover how autoimmune immunity develops and the effects that it can have and what we can do about it, of course. So beyond the gut and the immune system, which are two very big pieces of the puzzle in terms of the health challenges that kids experience, I will also talk about in future episodes. We'll cover many of the common nutritional and metabolic imbalances. So just to give you a very brief overview, probably the most common imbalance in autism is zinc and copper. So generally, I read in a study that it was 90 to 95% of kids have this imbalance. It's also common in many other conditions, including ADHD, depression, postpartum depression, anxiety, and so on. So it generally the zinc is too low and the copper is too high. That's the most common finding. And so I'll have a dedicated episode about this topic fairly soon because it is very important. And it's actually an imbalance that is not difficult to correct once you've tested for it. So that one is quite important. We'll talk about it. Other imbalances or deficiencies include low vitamin D. This is quite common. Low omega-3 fatty acids. There's a certain subset of kids, especially under 5 years of age, that have iron deficiency or low iron. This can cause, a number of health complaints or issues. Then another topic we'll cover in a fair amount of depth is that of mitochondrial dysfunction. So you may remember mitochondria from biology class. They're known as the powerhouses of the cell. That's where most of the energy in the body is made. So it's been shown that many autistic children suffer from some type of mitochondrial dysfunction. And because the mitochondria create the energy, most of the energy in the body, the systems that have high energy requirements, such as the brain, the muscles, and the gut, are usually some of the first to be affected when there's mitochondrial dysfunction. So we'll talk about that how to test for it, what signs, physical signs you can spot that, potentially it could be an issue for your child, and then how to test for it, and then what can be done about it. And of course, we'll talk about factors that contribute to mitochondrial dysfunction. And as you'll see later, these factors are very much in your control. So we'll talk about also carnitine deficiency. The carnitine is basically it's a nutrient that helps to get fatty acids into the mitochondria so they can be burned for fuel. So this is again linked to the previous topic of mitochondrial dysfunction. Then we'll talk about slightly more advanced stuff, such as glutathione deficiency. So many kids have a deficiency of, it's called glutathione, which is one of the primary or the primary antioxidants in the body. So it's extremely important for all manner of things, including the immune system, detoxifying foreign compounds such as heavy metals, chemicals, other toxins. So generally or often glutathione status has been shown to be low in autistic kids. Then we'll talk about glutamate, excess glutamate, which is a neurotransmitter that can, an excess of it can cause what is known as like cytotoxicity. Don't worry about what that means now. We'll cover that in much greater depth later on. Then there's other things like impaired methylation, which is another very important process in the body. So we'll cover what that's about, what causes impaired methylation. We'll also talk about sulfation impairment. So these are slightly more advanced things, but I'll break it down to what it means, how it could affect your child, and then what can be done. That's always the most important thing, is what can we do about these things. And then finally, we'll also talk about oxalates. So these are compounds in plants, fruits and vegetables mostly, and grains, that they've been shown to be an issue for many autistic kids. So I'll explain to you what they are in more depth, how they can affect kids, and how to test for them, and what we can do about them as well. So that will be a later episode. And then just to wrap up this episode, another common health challenge in autism is that of heavy metals and another toxicity. So I will talk at length about the big five heavy metals, so mercury, aluminum, arsenic, lead, cadmium, where they're the sources that we get them, the sources of exposure. I'll talk about how to test for heavy metals, what to do about heavy metals. I'll also talk about some chemicals and food additives that have either been shown to have a link with autism or are just generally good to avoid. So we'll talk about food colorants, emulsifiers, high fructose corn syrup, MSG, and certain other additives. So these may not yet, at least, have a connection to autism, but they certainly have a connection with health in general. So it's very important when you're trying to improve your child's health that we minimize as many of the potentially harmful compounds in the diet, the water, and the immediate environment. This is very, very important because, as you'll see later, many autistic kids have impaired detoxification abilities. So it means that generally normal levels of exposure in our daily lives can be much more detrimental for them than for us, say, or if they were otherwise in a much healthier state. So we'll talk at great length about these health challenges. And of course, the most important thing to remember is that there's a lot of stuff to cover, but relatively few things that you will do related to diet, supplementation, cleaning up the environment. You'll do a relatively few number of things that will cover so many bases. So don't worry, I'll teach you everything you need to know. And that wraps up this episode. So thank you for listening and hope to see you on the next one.